what we would have is on this switch, so far, just the VLANs identified, what they are, isolated versus community, and lastly, the association between the primary VLAN and the isolated and community VLANs, which are the secondary VLANs. What's next? Well, we have to start mapping the ports. We have to identify what secondary VLAN the port belongs to. Because these ports are no longer part of VLAN 100, meaning we don't go to the port and type in switch port access VLAN 100. No, we have to tell them they're part of a private VLAN. So if we examine the configuration for gigabit 0/2 and 3, what ports are those? Let's go back and check that out. 2 and 3 go down to PC 1 and 2, which are going to be part of the isolated VLAN of 101. So by examining the configuration for gig 02 and 03, we need to identify it as a private VLAN host. So this is going to be a these ports are associated with a private VLAN, but they are host ports, meaning they connect down to end stations. And notice the command is switch port mode. Switch port mode. Well, what are the other options we have? Switch port mode access. Switch port mode trunk. Switch port mode dynamic desirable, dynamic audible. In this case, it's switch port mode private VLAN host. And then we have to specify what the host association is. So what is your primary VLAN, since you're a private VLAN host? In this case, the primary VLAN is VLAN 100. And what is the secondary VLAN you are a member of? The secondary VLAN in this case is 101. And what is the secondary VLAN of 101? It is an isolated VLAN. So notice the configuration doesn't come flat out and say it's an isolated VLAN. You have to go back and check what type of VLAN 101 is to make sure you got it right. And we wanted these two interfaces to be in the isolated VLAN. So we've accomplished our goal here. So gig 03 and 02, part of VLAN 101, which is isolated. We accomplished that with these two commands here. Switch port mode, private VLAN host, and then switch port, private VLAN host association, primary VLANs 100, secondary VLANs 101. What about gig 04 and 05? We said both of these ports have to be in the community VLAN of 102. So if we go back to the configuration, we'll see here for gigabit 0/4 and 5, it's the same switch port mode private VLAN host command. So we're host ports within that private VLAN. Let's look at the switch port private VLAN host association command. In this case, primary VLAN's 100 and secondary VLAN in this case is 102. And what is that VLAN 102? It is a community VLAN. So therefore, our two ports, gigabit 04 and 05, the devices that are connected to those ports can communicate with each other because they are part of a community VLAN, the same community VLAN. So far, so good. But we're missing this configuration. This configuration is for the promiscuous port. So who is our promiscuous port? It's gigabit 0/1. It's the uplink. We want to make sure all these devices can communicate out to the cloud, whatever's out there. The core of our network, our data centers, the internet, whatever it happens to be. And any traffic coming back, we want to make sure it can go down to the devices. So to set up that promiscuous port, you go to the promiscuous port and you type in switch port mode private VLAN promiscuous. So you specify it as the promiscuous port, not a host like we did for the other ones. It is the promiscuous port. And then we have to do a mapping. So switch port private VLAN mapping. The primary VLAN is 100. And the community VLANs we have are 101 and 102. 101 and 102. So we are telling this promiscuous port that you are part of primary VLAN 100, but you will be responsible for all of those secondary VLANs and passing traffic to and from those secondary VLANs that are 101 and 102. So the configuration is a little bit confusing, as you can see, especially when we get down to these devices or these interfaces here. It doesn't explicitly say isolated. It doesn't explicitly say community. You have to have excellent documentation, excellent diagrams, and you want to be able to reference those and make sure that your associations for primary and secondary VLANs are accurate.